We're back.
I chose this photo for a reason, because Bocconi University's got this wonderful modernist architecture, and you can see simply to get from one place to the other was actually quite difficult. So what we found was that the online pivot was very convenient. It really shrank the space that we had to work that I had to work with by working online. And finally, what I would like to look at later on is the implications for practical use, more specifically for the PhD courses, but also maybe some suggestions for other pre or in-sessional work. This isn't actually my graph, but I found it very indicative of what we're trying to do. I'll just put this over here. What we were looking at is very much within the community of practice of the EAP classrooms, of which we had looking at various discourse patterns. Again, my screen keeps on going off. Can you still see it?
Yes, we can, yeah.
Okay, well, I just hope it carries on here. Both looking within the classes themselves, which was included, obviously, EAP practitioner, the students. But one of the things that we was able to also include the supervisors, the PhD supervisors, and the director themselves. This was something which became very important because it gave a lot more relevance to the course material that we're using. At the same time, because one of the basis of the whole course was to get the students to start publishing. This has become almost a priority for a lot of PhD schools, especially ones of these very high international character. So this aspect, I was looking both inward within the class itself, but also outside to the research community. And this is what we try to do on this course. Now,
your screen, I think, may have frozen again. There's no change of slide there.
Oh dear. Can you see this?
We're stuck on the community of practice slide.
Oh dear. Okay, can you see? I'll try this again.
I would love to jump in with your presentation from my end, but I seem to have an issue with Teams myself, which is not helping us all here.
Can you see the screen back again?
Yeah,
maybe
it is.
Maybe I'll try just to use it in the
sure. That's
this
fine.
mode.
Thank
yeah,
you.
It's not so good, but anyway. Anyway, very quickly, I'd like to talk about the two cohorts, which were very similar. The course lengths, they were about 6 weeks. They were from students from all over the world, literally from the Far East, Latin America. There was a few UK and American students. The courses were all English medium, but what was the most important is they were pretty heterogeneous. Now this, in fact, I've put out here hopefully you can see them, the different areas from which they were coming from. The Bocconi one was more economics based. They were doing business management, economics, but also legal studies, social and political sciences, and a lot of computer-based science. The Milan University ones, they were all social science, but even within this group here, they did have a lot of different studies they were doing. ABMs, that's agents-based mechanisms, quantitative and qualitative research, and so on. And this in itself, PhD students tend to be very solitary creatures. And it was to have an effect later on which we did the courses. Now, another interesting aspect, I hope you can see this, is that the courses actually started face-to-face. So we had I had one course literally which was halfway between the lockdown and the second course which was totally in the online mode. It's very interesting I took this photograph of this course, is that it typifies the attitudes of a lot of the teaching on the continent, in Italy in particular, but also very generally, that we had lots of German, Russian, East European students, is that online classes, and I was going through the whole critical thinking process through group work, tends to be very hierarchical. It's very much us against them, the professor and the students. And even this one here, this was supposed to be a seminar, which everyone's was participating in, is that the students automatically arranged the classroom in such a way that it was us versus them, the presenters versus the audience. And what happened on the online mode is that we're able to overcome this to a certain degree. And I thought that this was something which was very interesting. I've now changed my slide. Can you see this, the online pivot?
No, we can't. I'm just trying to open the PowerPoint so that I can try presenting from my end also.
Okay. I don't know why this is. Okay, I'll try to upload it again. I'm terribly sorry about this. Can we see this?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, so that was our face-to-face lessons. When we moved online, we had this three-part system. We started off, in fact, it's very interesting to hear the notes from the other colleagues from Reading, is that the first session was an online live session. And to a great extent, so I'll show you some samples of some of the work they actually did. But as much as possible, we tried to get the students to use their own materials, much like what Owen was talking about beforehand. It was up to them to decide how to apply the materials, what we're trying to teach during the lessons. The asynchronous discussions were, however, very closely integrated into the live sessions, in as much as that they were continuation of what we were talking about. I've got a couple of examples in a minute talking about how we tried to develop this, creating a research space. This, I thought, was very useful in that it gave the students time to actually develop what they were supposed to be doing, but at the same time, it put the emphasis on their own work. Finally, we had another live session, again, with the material that the students had commented on. They had also obviously monitored by myself, but which gave them the possibility to concentrate on the aspects that we were looking at of their work. Now I've changed again. Can you see this? The example.
No, unfortunately not, and I'm afraid I'm not able to present mine either at the moment.
Okay, I'm going to have to come off and on every time I'm doing this. Then I don't know why this is happening, but anyway. In fact, the whole thing is frozen. Oh dear. Okay. I'm terribly sorry about this. Okay, can we see this?
Yeah.
Okay. I hope I don't need to reload it, go off and reload every single slide. Yeah, this is an example of one of the synchronous sessions, in that we're trying to look at the material we're looking at was really discourse text management. Much of what Olwen was talking about beforehand, voice, the semantic density was a very strong issue in the, what the students were needing to develop. The referencing and phrasing. What we did not look at specifically was any grammar, academic language, mainly because being a PhD students, they had a very good grasp of these themselves anyway. I'll try to go on here. In particular,
it has frozen, but I've shared the PowerPoint in the chat. So if anyone wants to follow, if you just let us know what slide number, I think it's now slide 8.
Yes, the specifically the asynchronous mode, it gave the ability of the students actually to perfect what they were looking at. Now, these students themselves were working on either the final thesis, or sometimes a lot of work they were presenting to be published. The advantages of the working asynchronously was specifically that they put their own work, again, this is an example looking at how to create a research space, into their own work. And this created a lot more agency for the students. It made the other students as well, who were commenting on it. This is specifically done, for example, in discussion boards, or this one here, I think is an example from Teams. So it reinforced what we were trying to look at the beginning of the week. This later on, and I'll change to the next slide here, was strengthened considerably in the fact that we tried to widen our community of practice. It was no longer simply a matter of myself working with the students, but because we were going online, it became possible for the supervisors, of which the PhD students had a very close relationship with, but also the directors, to come along into the lessons and actually take an active part in these lessons. Now, obviously, these were, there's not so many of them, but for each of our live sessions, I think there was a continuous contribution from these, the supervisors. What did this do? It helped, as I said, it gave the supervisors themselves a big stake in the whole EAP process. So it made them feel that, yes, this is something which is really important. At the same time, their observations, they strengthened the relevance and the motivation, motivation for the students, and the relevance as well. And also, I think, which is something which is quite interesting, the authority of the EAP teachers themselves. Very often, for example, again, talking about creating a research space, one of the supervisors would jump in and say, yes, that's exactly what I've been talking about. Having students coming up with me, not being able to recognize what they need to develop in their final thesis. Finally, it gave the students themselves a heightened sense of their own involvement. And as I said, I would like to, I'm getting some feedback now. A quote from here from Laban Wenger here, this legitimate peripheral participation. They became a lot more involved with the whole process. Now, this, I think, I'm going on to the next one, publish or perish slide now. It became very important because, as I mentioned beforehand, these students were expected to publish. They were expected to become part of the whole research community. What did this mean is that I was myself able to include a lot of the genre, such as letters to the editors, the whole responses to reviewers, the whole process actually of the peer review within the lessons themselves. This immediately, whenever we talked about publishing, about editing, and I have to underline here that I'm also a language editor for one of these journals, I could almost see the reaction from the students writing down notes, adding to the chat, said, okay, how did you do this? What was this? The amount of relevance went up quite considerably. This particular note here, reviewer number 2, I think we've all gone through this process ourselves, but it made the whole process a lot more relevant, both for the students themselves and for the supervisors. And I think that this would not have been possible, really, had we done this face-to-face. There wouldn't have been the time or the space available for supervisors simply to come along. And in fact, I was able to increase this, and I'm going on here to the webinar now, in that at the end of both of these courses, which were parallel, as I said, we had a single webinar held online, of which I was able to have not only the students of both the universities coming along, but also some editors, the supervisors themselves, obviously, language editors, reviewers, and so on. This was, I wouldn't say fundamental, but it really underlined the whole process that these PhD students were making this bridge between the university, between taught lessons, and the wider research community. And I'd like to just read this quote, which Flaminius Guazzoni actually made during the webinar. And it's to remember, this was a social, someone who knew nothing about the whole community of practice concept. And he says, like, basically, publishing, it's like being at a chic cocktail party, where the peer-reviewed journals are this cocktail party. Each room, each journal, was filled with a group of professionals talking about their own subject. Talk too loudly, and you're going to be ignored. Talk too softly, and you're not going to be published. And I think this is indicative of how these two communities really link together. I think, this is very much in line with what Morita and the outsiders wanting in. By including a lot of the genre, and I have done this, as I said, for the PhD students, but even with first year students at Bocconi, master's students, whenever you talk about the possibility of publishing, the possibility of doing more research, then their ears pick up. And I think this is something which is very important. I'd just like to go finally here and have a look at some of the affordances and implications of the fact that this course went online. The first thing, as I said before, was this close integration of the synchronous and the asynchronous modes. It was very interesting to hear the colleagues talking about the proportion between synchronous and asynchronous. I think what was more important, at least in my case, is the integration of the actual material, which was being taught during the lessons. But the first synchronous session was simply carried on. It gave the students more possibility to refine what they were working on, to look at the material involved with, and to make it their own. And this leads to the second point, which is the student agency. By putting the students right at the center of the feedback sessions, of the discussion boards, then it was no longer an abstract lesson. And also by the very fact that the supervisors were able to come in and say, yes, this is what you're going to meet. It was a direct relevance to the work they were working at. And then finally, by both establishing a stronger stakeholder presence within the lessons themselves, but also widening out and including the wider research community, I think we had, again, this increased the relevance and the motivation of the students to do the whole course. The actual evaluation at the end of the course was, yes, they had to pass, they had to come along to the classes. However, what was really important, and quite a few of the students actually did this, they came out and asked, look, I want to put this out for publications later on. And I think that was the real relevance of working online. Just to come back to Lev and Wenger, they talk about a legitimate peripheral participation and said there's no real non-legitimate participation. I would just like to add, as a thought, afterthought, if you like, that this non-legitimate participation would be not being able to publish, at least for these students here. Just a thought myself, and it's nothing which can actually refer to. The last slide I've got here is simply a matter of references, but if anyone's got any questions, hopefully, some way or the other, you will be able to get these questions.
Thank you very much, Robert, and my apologies for the technical difficulties, and I think we're all having similar issues at the moment, so well done for sticking at it, even if we couldn't see the rest of your slides. These are in the Files tab for the general channel, if anyone needs to review those, but certainly just listening to you made sense, so that was perfect. Thank you. We are short of time, just to allow people to go off for lunch, but I fully appreciate we had to pause a few times here. I haven't seen any particular questions come in, but a statement really from Olwen and Emma, that collaboration between EAP world and the subject lecturers, if we wish to split them in that way, actually does take us back to team teaching and working together, and some really interesting comments from those PhD supervisors came out there, obviously, and it's really great to see that crossover between the EAP and the subject content, perhaps. One main question, what was the impetus for the supervisors to actually engage, given that they are usually busy people, etc.?
Yes, well, I think the fact that I mentioned before, the fact that being online literally shrank the whole time and space element. I had some of the supervisors, literally, they were in their car, they switched on their smartphones, said, right, I'm going to come along for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
As you saw from the photographs, if you could see them of, well, Bocconi in any case, it's an enormous place to get from one area to the other. It's very, very difficult. However, supervisors having a lot closer relationship with their PhD students, they're more concerned with what they're doing. The very fact that even a lot of the professors, because they're having to publish in English and other language, they themselves have got these questions of how are we going to do this? And a lot of the aspects that we're looking at, the semantic density, for example, which was a great thing which is coming up. By realizing that this is completely relevant, not to only for the PhD students, but also for their own work, then they're very curious. And the fact that they could simply drop in 10, 15 minutes, it made the whole thing so much easier. And I think that's the main reason why we got them. But we had a lot. I had one, for example, the Milan University is literally behind the courtrooms of where the Manipuliti court cases were carrying on. And I had literally one of the judges from the legal studies coming in. Look, I've just got to go into the courtroom, but could you answer this? So okay. I think it's something which should be remembered. And I think really overall, the fact of going online, at least for PhD students, was extremely relevant.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And that's very interesting stories to hear there too, and some great feedback from those PhD candidates. So that was great.